Yo, what's going on, everybody? We're going to get the show started just a moment, but we're going to jam out to Feeding the Ducks for a second. Let me get this down. Hello. All right, we got people coming in. Now to the Hungry Panda's here. Caretaker Dan is here. He's ready. What's going on? I think the text, let me make sure. Yep, okay. Text message is out. So we're going to do it. We're back. Been a while since I've done one of these. Very excited to do it. Got some trippy stuff to talk about. Things just keep getting weirder, folks. Jonathan, Boothbrander, thank you. Says, let's go. Welcome back. Basil, Salt Paul's here. Andy's here. The Brave March is here. Okay, here we go. People are coming in. We're going to start the show just a second. This is these few precious moments before we officially start the show. The pre-show that those who listen to the podcast are going to miss out. They're going to miss out on the jam. They're going to miss out on the welcome. I'm going to try my best to communicate some trippy stuff today, but things are getting trippy, you know? Things are crazy, man. And I know I'm not the only one who knows this. I know every Canarian knows this. And so we're, of course, going to place high value on people calling in. Remember, this is a call-in show. It requires people to call in. We'll be setting a 10-minute timer for those calls. It's just a suggestion, but it's a quality suggestion. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts, your experiences, just on everything going on, but kind of setting the theme of the supernatural versus the hyper reality. And we're going to, I'm going to share some of my own experiences with this, and then we're just going to figure it out. It's going to be a blast. It's been 3 or 4 weeks since I've done this show, so if I forget how it goes, forgive me. We're going to do it together. If you're new to the show, thanks for sticking in there. Thanks for hanging out with us for a minute or two. We're going to get the show started in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Caleb says, can we acknowledge that people have been talking about hyperreality and its application to Nick Fuentes and AI for like 10 years? I don't know about Nick Fuentes for 10 years. Yes, I first was talking about hyperreality, simulacra, and simulation and simulacra. Basically since the beginning of CCNT. My first mention was 2013, 2014. At least that's when I read it the first time. And you know me, when I'm reading something, I can't help but talk about it on the show. Yes, this is not a new concept, but it is kind of new when it comes to mainstream conversations about this. It is not a, well, at least as of now, it has not been sort of a mainstream conversation point because it's kind of trippy. And it's difficult to talk about trippy stuff in sort of a mass media sense because, you need a special kind of person to appreciate that kind of conversation, which is where podcasts have thrived for so long. All right, so let's do it. Let's get the show started. Remember, it is a call-in show. You can call in. The call-in link is in the description of this video. Look down in the description. I think maybe I put it after the description here, but it's in there. Click on that. You'll answer a couple questions. You can do it on any device. Very easy. And if it doesn't let you click it, then like copy paste it, that sort of thing. That's the thing to do. All right. Oh, also, I have a doctor's appointment in 1 hour and 10 minutes. So we're going to do all this. We're going to do it very quickly and efficiently. We're going to blow minds in an efficient manner. Okay. Here we go. You know how this works. I'm going to put this back up on the screen. We're going to officially start the podcast now. From now on, from here forward, this is what's going to be on the podcast feed. Here we go.
Called it. We got a caller. We got a caller on the line here.
What's going on, buddy? Buddy, just you. I'm talking to my buddy. You're my buddy. What's up, my buddy? This is your best buddy, Basil, and we're here for Canary Cry Clubhouse, an opportunity to decompress from the week, to talk about things going on in the world and in our lives. No headlines allowed. Don't worry, not going to stress you out. But I do consider it sort of a companion piece to understanding a lot of the analysis and the deconstruction we're doing on the mainstream and the alt media throughout the week. I mean, this is kind of the thing. It's kind of one of the things about Canary Cry News Talk and the Canary Cry-verse in general is, we've been going for 12, 13 years now. We've talked about a lot of the bigger concepts like a long time ago. We often take for granted, like, using language and talking about concepts of like, oh yeah, we did an episode about that back in 2014. We don't need to, people already know this. Like, nobody's going back and listening to those 2014 episodes. Some are. It's very impressive when people do that. Sometimes people let us know. That's what we're going to do. So call in. You'll be put in a waiting room. It's very simple. Click the button, answer a few questions. It'll put you in the waiting room. You can hang out there, watch the show, listen to the show there. You'll want to close out your YouTube or whatever on your device and just hang out in the waiting room. You'll have a great viewing experience. You can chat with people behind the scenes. And then when the time comes, I'll bring you up on stage. And that's the way that we do it. And of course, a big old shout out to everybody who got the text message today. We got the Canary Cry text message alert system. If you're not on it, get on it. Take out your phone, open up the text messages, and send the word Canary, Canary, to 877-740-3226. That's Canary to 877-740-3226. It'll put you on the list, and you'll receive notifications when we go live throughout the week. And the best part is you can text us back at that number. You can tell us anything you want, just whatever you got on your heart, whatever you got on your mind. I can't carry on a conversation with you via text. It's very expensive on our side. But I do see them and I do read them. And you can be like, let's see here, 859 just texted, says, have fun. I'm working, but looking forward to hearing it later this week. Well, good luck working there, 859 down in the salt mines. 907, as always, coming in. Greetings from South Central Alaska. Always has a very beautiful picture that comes along with that. 269 says, sounds like a very interesting Clubhouse topic. I like it. Godspeed with the show today, Basil. You are doing great. Thank you very much, 269. Appreciate that. Okay, so let's get into, we don't have a whole ton of time today, unfortunately, but we're gonna get her done here. And the title of this Clubhouse is The Supernatural versus the Hyperreal. I was talking about the Hyperreal most recently on Monday, okay? And so if you missed Monday's show in Canary Cry News Talk, well, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction here. And of course, as always, which is just how this show works, usually when something comes up, we talk about, we go off the rails into some sort of rabbit hole. It ends up becoming pretty important, usually a week or a month or so later. And today, this kind of caught traction. It only took a couple days for it to make it into the mainstream. So the hyperreal versus the supernatural. We all kind of have an understanding of the supernatural. We consider ourselves to have a supernatural worldview that includes all sorts of things. It includes sort of a biblical supernatural understanding, of what we can see, what we're told, what is sort of theologically sound supernaturally, but also, extends to sort of the whole supernatural mechanics of the world. Not to say necessarily that the earthly explanations for what supernatural is, the sort of Harry Potter magic or this or that, we don't even really claim to make any real solid doctrinal statements about these things, but we know, we see it, we feel it, and many of us live it, that there's something else going on in this world that is different or more than what we are told is reality, mostly sort of material scientific reality. Everybody kind of understands that. But then there's this concept called hyperreality. And it turns out what most people kind of consider reality just on a daily basis, when we're not sitting there and we're thinking about it, not when we're in our sort of trippiest headspace or we're deep in prayer or something, we all know the things can get a little fuzzy in those spaces. But hyperreality is this very interesting concept, and it was from this guy called Baudrillard, the French philosopher. And we don't put a whole lot of stock in philosophers as some sort of clergy or whatever, some sort of special person. But one thing that is special about philosophers is that they get paid to just sort of think about things, where most of us, we don't really get the chance to think about them. Many of us do, and we will do it on our spare time, and often getting deep into considering these different natures of reality, it can get a little distracting. It becomes difficult to focus on regular stuff. And let's be real, when it comes to reality, the reality is kids got to eat. We got important stuff going on. So to a degree, the concepts, the presentations by various philosophers are at least a good way to have a starting point in discussing. It's a sort of a pre-written language to discuss these sorts of things. It's never a sort of, so often it can feel like an immediate, what's the word? I don't know, consent to whatever this philosopher was or has, or the extent of his ideas or their ideologies or the way they lived or something. This is not a, user discretion is advised, really. We're not trying to lift anybody up. But we talked about hyperreal, and the basic concept, I'll give my definition, then I got a couple things to read, and we just want to try to lay down some understanding before we jump in. Hyper reality sounds very, I don't know, very technical, very matrixy, and I'll get into the word hyper reality itself versus supernatural and how I think there's some deceptions going on there very effectively. But the long story short, in my words, hyper reality is when the signs and symbols that we use to understand or communicate the world become more real to us than the actual things that those signs and symbols are supposed to represent. A good example is, a map on your phone. Okay. Let me give this one. This was an example given by Michael Knowles, who just happened to cover hyperreality 2 days after we did. He gives this example. So you have a strawberry, right? That's real. We have a real strawberry. But then you have, somebody takes a strawberry and they boil it down and they make a strawberry jam, right? Now you're eating the jam. Like, wow, this is made of strawberries. This tastes like strawberries. It doesn't really, it tastes like a part of what strawberries taste like, but you have strawberry jam. But then you take, take it a step further. You don't do strawberry jam. Now you boil it down even more. You add some sugar, and now you make a strawberry candy. Even though I love those strawberry candies that looks like strawberries, the ones at the dentist's office or the doctor's office, they wrap it in sort of a strawberry wrapper. And now you have the strawberry candy. And you can take that even further, but and then we will take it further. You go from a strawberry candy, then they're taking sort of the essence of strawberry candy, and they'll extract the smell of strawberry or something they think is representative of strawberry, and they put it into a car deodorizer. What do they call that? As a car scent. A scented, I'll say candle. We'll say scented candle. I can't remember what those car stink things are. So they make a strawberry scented candle, right? So you have the real thing, which is strawberry. And by the time you get down these several different iterations of strawberry, they'll give you a strawberry candle. Let's say they even put that strawberry candle in the shape of a strawberry. And it smells, it doesn't actually smell like a strawberry, but it smells like what has been branded as strawberry smell. Strawberry taste and candy, strawberry smell. It's not actually strawberry, but it's just like represents what strawberry should smell like, or maybe what it does smell like in a cartoonish version. So hyperreality is taking that strawberry candle, lighting on fire, and smelling the scent and going, ah, strawberry. That's strawberry. But it's not strawberry. It's nothing like strawberry at all. It's only representing strawberry through these many different iterations of abstraction. You know, you got strawberry, you make it into jam. Now it's more like sugary strawberry. It doesn't taste like a real strawberry, but it's like strawberry and sugar. But then you take that and you condense it even more into a candy. Now there's not even really any real strawberry in the candy, but it's essence of strawberry. It's the impression of strawberry. But then you take it even further away from the candy and you put it into a smell. And they say that's strawberry smelling. Then you smell that strawberry smell and you go, wow, I love strawberry. That's hyperreality. Hyperreality is so devoid, so separated through different iterations of signs and symbols and suggestions that has nothing to do with the real object. But we still sit there and we go, strawberry candle. Smells like strawberry. Look, that's strawberry. That's what strawberry smells like. It's what it tastes like. I love strawberry. It's my favorite thing. The problem is, at this point, all of us live at some point, some percentage of our day, some percentage of our life. Some people, it's 100%. Some people, it's maybe 80%. Some people, it's probably less, maybe 10%. Maybe they don't even have the internet, and that helps you stay away from hyperreality quite a bit. But all of us are living to some degree in what's called hyperreality, which means as we go throughout our day, and I'll tell you what, if there was some sort of test or quiz you could take that tells you like how much hyperreality you're living in, every single one of us would be absolutely destroyed by how high the percentage of hyperreality we're living in, right? It's unfortunate. And the other thing with hyperreality is you don't actually know. You don't know it's hyperreality. That's what makes it so convincing. That's what makes it so effective. And really, it's a version of the Matrix in that we are all living in our different versions of hyperreality, which is why it's so easy to disagree with people. It's why it's so easy to talk past its people, especially as a Christian. It's why it's almost inevitable that if you're having a conversation with somebody, that you're just going to be talking past each other in a lot of ways. We're almost always, when we say strawberry, talking about a candle, and we're not talking about the actual fruit. And I got a couple things I wanted to read. I think we'll make it, some people wrote some things. And so I think this will help us kind of understand it a little bit more. This came from a site called Philosophizy, which is a great name. Let me put it up here, help us get some understanding. Is anything real? The problem of hyperreality in a digital world. In an age of virtual experiences, digital media, and ever-advancing technology, it's increasingly difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is artificially constructed. French philosopher Jean Baudrillard explored this issue with his concept of hyperreality, a state where the lines between reality and simulation blur, leaving us questioning the very nature of existence. And there's a detail he's going to get into here that is really the key to this. And the key is that hyperreality, as we talk about it practically, isn't just that you're looking or smelling a candle and thinking that's a strawberry. It's that it's impossible to tell the difference. Not only that you aren't observing reality, but that things are so askew, that things, the vibrancy is so turned up on everything. The volume is turned up to 11. Everything is cranked up across the board, that you're not even able to tell what is real and what is hyperreal. Because what I want to make clear is that I'm not saying that reality doesn't exist. There's some postmodernists and some people who take from Baudrillard to mean that observing reality is impossible, that there is no reality. That's one way to take this, and I think sort of pervert what Baudrillard was getting to. And again, the irony is to take Baudrillard's hyperreality and use it to imply that objective reality doesn't exist is itself a hyperreality of hyperreality. But look, we don't need to get too crazy. So one of the biggest points is it's impossible to tell what is real and what is not real. Not that real doesn't exist, is that things are just so wonky, things are just so crazy that you have a very hard time distinguishing. Okay, it goes on. Baudrillard's work offers a provocative lens through which to examine our media-saturated world and raises critical questions. Is anything truly real? Or have we constructed a reality based on images, symbols, and simulations that bear little resemblance to what once existed? So there's what I was talking about. I disagree with the direction. I think it's a little too easy. I think it's kind of a boring way to consider hyperreality. I think it's a little rote. I think it's a little pedestrian. That's okay. Philosophy does a good job of explaining it later on. But that's where I would get in a conversation with Philosophy here. All right. Understanding hyperreality. Hyperreality refers to the inability to distinguish between reality and the simulated version of it. In Baudrillard's view, modern societies have become so immersed in media, technology, and consumer culture that representations of reality have replaced reality itself. One example of this, and somebody mentioned it earlier, and hilariously, somebody tweeted about it as well. We'll get into that. But one good example of this, easy example today, is the word Nazi, right? People calling each other Nazis, describing things as Nazi or people as Nazi. When people are saying Nazi, they're not actually really meaning a 1940s German socialist nationalist thing, because that's a very complex thing. There's lots of things in there, and that's one thing you're not allowed to do, is get into the complexity and subtleties of what actually was a literal person, a man, named Hans, who had a family and liked riding horses, who got drafted and became a Nazi, or what, you can't forget all that. Nazi is like the candle version of strawberry, where we can say it, we can recognize it, through symbols, not just a symbol like the swastika, but symbols like somebody's ideology or the words they use. They use the wrong word for something, you call them a Nazi. So there's a kind of a simple example. Where were we? Rather than experiencing the world directly, we interact with a version of it that has been mediated through television, social media, virtual reality, and advertising. This is something I bring up all the time. There's almost nothing that you can come in contact with besides your immediate surroundings that isn't being mediated through some kind of technological, narrative, ideological filter. Everything you see online, not like every piece of information, just like literally everything online, you're getting a hyper reality version of it, even just by definition, because all you're getting is symbols. You only get symbols. You're not experiencing any reality. It's this symbol delivery mechanism, whether it's words or pictures or, even in a way here, in philosophically, I'm more of a symbol to somebody who's interacting just kind of on a basic level. Now, we know I'm a real person. I try my best to be as real as I possibly can, despite the VR headset and the googly eyes, but I will even get you there in a second. Baudrillard called these representations simulacra, copies of something that is no longer has an original. When the copy becomes more real to us than the thing it represents, we enter into hyperreality. In this state, the real world and the simulated one merge. And that's the key, where the real world and the simulated world merge, leaving us in a kind of existential limbo where we no longer know what is authentic. The irony with that last part is you only no longer know what is authentic if you actually stop and care about what is authentic. And that's what most people are not doing. Stopping, receiving a piece of information, stopping and going, okay, is this a simulation of information? Is this objective reality? How many filters is this coming through? Is this the strawberry? Is this the strawberry candle? Is it something in between? Is this the strawberry jam? If we're not stopping and thinking about this, basically with every single piece of information that comes, we are living in some version of hyperreality. And of course, it's impossible to sit there and question every single piece of information and sign and symbol that comes to us. It's just too much. We just get too much. It's impossible to sit and parse through every single thing, because that would be our whole day. We would never get anything done. We would never, and that's where, to a certain degree, and I find myself, I can snap into this whenever I want. I can snap into this mode whenever I want. And I'm telling you, it's on one hand, I believe it's part of my job to do this. On the other hand, this is where some like psychosis can kick in. This is where you can really go off into some rabbit holes or go completely off the tracks, sort of obsessing with parsing out every single thing that comes your way, trying to figure out if it's reality or hyperreality. And the real danger is when you're given a piece of hyperreality and you go, is this hyperreality? Is this reality? And you come to the wrong conclusion. And you come to the conclusion that it is reality, but it isn't. And you do that enough times. And because you're trying to go through the process sort of knowingly, but you're coming to the wrong conclusions, that is where, things can get really squirrely. I think AI psychosis has to do with this. I think because when people are talking with AI all day, every day about the trippiest things possible, there's this impression that the AI is helping them parse out what is real or not, because they're asking questions, they're giving their theories, they're going back and forth. Whereas if you're doing that with a person, you can actually start pulling apart, hitting some friction like sandpaper, helping each other pull pieces apart and throw it in the trash. But with AI, it's just going to tell you you're right about everything. So this is related to that. Examples of hyperreality in modern life. The phenomenon of hyperreality is pervasive in modern culture. One of the most common examples is the way we consume news and media. No kidding. In the digital age, we often receive a curated version of events, whether through social media algorithms and the selective editing of news reports or staged reality TV shows. Yeah, reality TV is a great example of hyperreality. The representation of reality is filtered, distorted, and tailored to suit audience expectations. That's a big part of this, leaving us with a mediated version that feels more convincing than raw reality itself. And that's another key, is that hyperreality often feels more real than reality itself. It's more convincing. There's more, all the levels are cranked up to 11. So it seems much more viable. It seems much more experiential than the elusive strawberry itself. Another striking example is in the world of theme parks. They talk about Disneyland, obviously. Baudrillard argued that theme parks create a hyperreal environment where the artificial worlds are presented in more perfect, idealized than the real world. In these spaces, the boundaries between fantasy and reality dissolve, allowing visitors to experience an idealized version of life that feels more compelling than reality itself. I would say very similar to social media in that way. Theme parks, social media have that in common. Now, here's one of the fun ones. Even in the rise of virtual reality and augmented reality adds layers to this hyperreal experience, offering simulations that feel indistinguishable from physical worlds. In these environments, people can experience alternate versions of life, raising questions about what counts as real when virtual experiences evoke real emotions and sensations. I'll push back just because I have a lot of experience with VR. I don't think VR in any form that I've seen so far is convincing enough to actually offer a hyperreal experience. I think whatever, the concept that they're sharing here, the ideas behind it is true, but on a practical level, so far I have not experienced a VR technology that is convincing enough to be hyper reality, because that's the thing about hyper reality. It has to be convincing. If it's not convincing, it's not hyper reality. The consequences of hyperreality, the implications of living in a hyper-real world are profound. As we increasingly interact with simulations, we risk losing our connection to the real, grounding world. Baudrillard warned that hyperreality could erode our sense of authenticity and lead to a society that values appearance over substance. In such a world, truth becomes irrelevant. And what matters most is how convincing or engaging a representation is, regardless of its connection to reality. Back to the VR thing a little bit. I don't know exactly how, I don't know if this is going to be totally convincing to people, but of course, the fact that I wear a VR headset with the googly eyes always sets people off. People hate it. And it's probably, I mean, for sure, if we're being honest, it's one reason why this show is so, let's say, boutique and exclusive. And I've gotten it forever, even way back in the beginning. People very irritated that I'm not just presenting my face on the internet or whatever. And in their minds, and I believe them when they say this, but their explanation is like, how can I trust you if I can't see your face? How can I trust you if I can't look into your eyes? As if they have a sort of magical power that seeing somebody's face will tell them the truth or not. Look at literally every streamer on earth who shows their face. You're getting a hyper real experience of that person. Their face is not their face. Sure, maybe it's shaped. It's, if you want to get real deep into it, the symbol of their face that is projected to you through the internet, through your screen, may resemble the face on the other side of the camera, but it's not the face. And of course, this is not going to surprise anybody, whether it's television or streaming or whatever, social media. When you're looking at someone's face, especially now, it tells you nothing because they're wearing a face already. They're wearing their own version of a mask, okay? They're wearing a mask online. You're not going to look into the eyes of Hassan Piker through the screen and get some sort of supernatural insight into whether to trust them or not. Think of all the streamers and the TV people who you see their face and you still can't trust them. Okay. But there's this impression, there's a symbol, it's almost a symbol itself, that if I can't see your face, then I can't trust you. And that's very real to some people. And it's not without some sort of logic in other situations. But the sort of irony of it is, in my opinion, in the sort of art project that is wearing the VR headset, that is the googly eyes, I think it's actually an important confrontation that people should have with the idea of seeing a face. Because what's really important? Is it really important that you see my face? Will that give you something when it comes to my words that the words don't give you already? And if that is true, that's a really good question for us to think about. Why is it that there's a sort of hang up? Why is it that big googly eyes staring back at you is so disquieting, is so uncomfortable that you'll discount the words that are being spoken. It says here, for example, the dominance of social media platforms often amplifies this problem. Users create and filter their lives to present idealized versions of themselves, contributing to a culture of performance where authenticity is sacrificed for likes and approval. Over time, this creates a distorted sense of self and reality, where the line between online personas and real identities become unclear. And I'll tell you one thing. It's been helpful for me over the many years. Remember, this was a decision that I made back in 2012, okay? This is one that I'm, at this point, just having to live with, unless, the Lord gives me some amazing reason not to do so. But again, the lie or the hyperreality that when you're seeing anyone or anything online and you are able to distinguish between a persona or a real identity or the truth about someone, or maybe they're getting some sort of paycheck, $7,000 paycheck for saying what they're saying. This is a sense of sort of false confidence in our ability to accurately read the symbols on the screen. Again, somebody's face, somebody's countenance on the screen counting as one of these symbols. And back to social media and stuff, this was one of the reasons why this became a very important thing for me to sort of obsess over while I was gone for the past few weeks. Because it was really weird. It was really weird. Like I mentioned to Gons when I got back, this was the first time. Let me check the time. Oh boy, this is gonna. I'm sorry, I'm doing so much talking here. We do have a caller. I want to make sure to get them in, but let me tell this story. This was the first time I had gone out of town for an extended period of time without doing a show from abroad. It's the first time. So I had this really weird experience of actually being kind of disconnected from my regular pattern of life, not just being home, but also doing the show. And part of the struggle with Gons and I, and we were talking about this right before yesterday's show, and it's like in our line of work, there are extremely clear and visible indications of success, right? In the worldly view of this sort of thing. There's very clear, visible indications of success. That's views, that's followers, that's subscribers, etc. It's very quantifiable. It's something everybody agrees on. Everybody agrees for the most part, that when you see somebody who has 1 million followers, you go, oh, it's doing pretty good. That's successful. Nobody really, unless you're trying to make a point, will look at somebody with 1 million followers and be like, I don't know, not doing too good, right? And Gons and I are confronted basically every week with this kind of mind-bending thing. I was going to say mind-bending reality, but in this conversation, we got to, I got to be specific with these words. It's just this mind-bending thing that by literally any of the agreed upon metrics of society today, again, followers, subscribers, views, things like this, and I'll call those hyperreal metrics, right? We should not exist. We should not be able to keep doing this. Are the displayed views on our content for whatever that is worth? There's always a question about what's being displayed, what's not being displayed. But our displayed views, our displayed subscribers or followers, well, not necessarily like sort of unimpressive. I mean, for the most part, pretty good, but they're nowhere near where they should be for us to be doing what we do full time as often as we do, with as much energy and time that we put it into. The numbers just aren't there. Again, the displayed numbers. Nobody would look at our, I think we have like 9,000, besides the Face Like the Sun channel. But even then, the views on Face Like the Sun are so depressed compared to the subscribers. It makes no sense. I have like 2,000 Twitter followers, and probably half of those are bots. You look at any of the views, it's, again, not nothing, but not impressive enough to justify, by the standards of this world, this hyper reality, to be able to do what we do and actually mostly make a living at it. It's sort of 100% outside of the realm of what's considered enough to justify the sort of time and attention that we put into this. Again, remember those numbers being sort of a hyper, that is a symbol, okay? That number is supposed to symbolize people. And it's so often that all of us, especially people on this side of the camera, will base everything off of those numbers, not just those numbers as a quantity, but that's the people. That number, that symbol means the people. And somehow, by the grace of God, is an absolute miracle, seriously, outside of any explanation, that we are able to keep doing what we're doing. There, by no hyperreal metric. It blows our minds all the time, and we have to remind ourselves about this, because we're always confronted with these numbers. They're like in our face. Even, we try our hardest not to think of our own success or think of our own value or self-worth or something by those metrics, by those numbers. We try our best, but it's impossible to avoid seeing them. And when we do see them, it's impossible not to think, what are we doing? How are we doing this? Why are we doing this? If we're not careful, and thank God, if the faith that God's given us, again, the faith doesn't come from us, the faith comes from him. But if it weren't for the faith that God's given us, if it wasn't what it was, we'd be absolute fools to keep putting so much of our time and attention into this. Again, just on the hyper-real level. Because those numbers are the hyper-real. It's a good example. Whether it's followers, views, subscribers, whatever, it's a number. The big number, good. Small number, sad. And those numbers, reason is big or reason is good or sad, is because that's people. Those are the people. That is the symbol for the people who care about what we have to say. And by extension, that number in the world's standards equals success. Okay. The numbers on the screen, again, not real people, but are supposed to represent people. And there's a problem that comes when us or anybody looks at that number and confuses that number with real human people. And I get it. That's how numbers work. That's like why numbers were invented, were to symbolize things. But there's sort of an inside, there's an inside change. There's an inside shift that comes with that. But the miracle is when we look and we see what should be, and then look past the numbers, past the hyperreal, and see what is, that there are enough real people that are partnering with us, real people who partner through us with us through like V for V and all the different things, the value people put in, or even if it's just interaction. I mean, it absolutely defies hyperreality. Again, remember, hyperreality is what basically is the way we see the world all the time. Again, to us, it's reality. It's impossible to distinguish. But hyperreality being sort of the simulation, it defies the simulation. It makes no sense. The very existence of this show, of this community, it's actually this very interesting crack in hyperreality. There's like a little bit of light shining through, because by the illusion, by the numbers, this shouldn't be able to happen. And the truth is that reality God's reality, the objective reality that we think we're interacting with, that we have a hard time confusing with the signs, the symbols, the hyperreality, there is a reality, and that's God's reality, okay? By definition, reality belongs to God. And we know that in God's reality is supernatural. It defies the hyperreal. It defies the symbolic. It defies the simulation. We're taught to believe, even through the world, the world language, the word supernatural, right? Supernatural. We might take natural and we're like, okay, that's reality. And super meaning, ooh, more than reality. Ooh, it's this special version of reality. It's the supernatural. But the fact is that reality, like it's implying that God's reality is something other than reality. The supernatural is the reality. And we know this, but putting it into the context of this spectrum we have of reality, you would think a spectrum would go from like hyper reality on one side, and then in the middle of the line would be reality, and then way on the right side of the line would be supernatural, as if supernatural is this elevated form of reality, and that hyperreality is this lower form of reality. But the reality is that reality is supernatural, and the hyperreality is distracting us from that. The hyperreal is convincing us that reality is not supernatural, that it's more boring. I mean, even in the way the words, I'll get into that in a second. Even hyperreality, like the word hyperreality has hyper. It's like it's almost like a different version of super reality, mega reality. This bigger, better version of reality. When that's not the case. It should be called hypo reality because it's less real. Anyways. Okay, so where was I? So often, and it's almost always, again, I'm not judging anybody. This is just the way of being a human being. We're trapped in this sort of illusory hyperreality. And like I said, hyperreality is by definition deceiving. And it should be cooler and better and sort of elevated, but it's not the case. I mean, that's what keeps us in the confusion between the illusion and I'm not even saying, hold on, let me get a grip for a second. So on my trip, I began to get a little down, like kind of a little, I don't know, some separation anxiety or something. I wasn't tuning in. I wasn't looking at messages. I was kind of keeping track of what's going on in the world. But when I was gone, I didn't have any numbers to look at, right? I wasn't looking at views. I wasn't looking at subscribers. Wasn't looking at any of those hyperreal things. And it was interesting because I didn't notice it at first, but it turns out a couple of weeks in, somehow I kind of stepped out of that normal hyper reality of measuring how things are going by these numbers. And then I'd ask myself and be like, okay, well, what am I doing? Am I delusional? Like, I know what the numbers generally are, and they're not that great, but I was disconnected from the experience of being here, doing it, doing the show, showing up, doing what we feel we've been called to do. I was disconnected from the reality of actually sitting down and doing it. And for those couple of weeks, the idea of like, oh, I do a podcast, and I get to talk about stuff on the internet, or oh, people actually care what I have to say. I just sort of disconnected from the experience of that hyper reality, and it felt strange. It's like, what am I doing? It's I just literally at one point I'm like, am I delusional? Like nobody cares what I do. Like I know I'm just doing it for myself. Like I get a lot out of it. Like it's very important for me. And that's one thing that I noticed the most when I stopped doing it was like, oh, maybe I am just doing that for me. Maybe maybe I'm just, you know, justifying doing it for myself by thinking that like people actually care, living some sort of illusion, thinking that what I have to say, actually matters to anybody. And I'd remember the numbers, and how they made no sense to how we were able to keep doing it. And I was like confronted with those hyper real standards, wondering like, do I just need to stop wasting my time? Like I'm just thinking of the hyperreal standards, how it made no sense. And I get home and it comes time to do the show. And I sit down in my chair thinking, okay, what am I doing? I'm just going to sit down, just going to show up. That's what this has always been, sitting down, showing up, even when it doesn't, when I don't feel like it. Often I do feel like it, but, gotta do it because, what the Lord has revealed in the daytime is still true in the nighttime. And that's a piece of, encouragement that I give to anybody because these things can feel, life can feel this way. It can feel this like, what in the world? What is the purpose? Why nobody cares? How am I? Whatever. But then you remember, what the Lord has told you, what the promises has been made, what the directives you've been given are. And just remember that just because it feels like it's nighttime and you can't see the horizon or you can't see the mission, it's there. It's just dark, but the world hasn't changed since the sun went down. So just keep remembering that. And I sit down and I sort of buckle in just to do another show. And I log in and I start catching up on emails and text messages because apparently I'm the only one who does this, and DMs, and people from all over the world are sending us messages and text messages and direct messages and just start sharing, sort of unsolicited, and just the Lord put it on their hearts to just send an email, just to say thank you and to tell us what's, they've been listening for a long time, or maybe they're new to the show and they tell us what the show's meant to them and they tell us about their life and how the show, helped them or whatever, showed them something, or even just like felt less alone, and say how grateful they are and tell us what's going on in their lives. And it's not thousands of them, it's not even hundreds of them, but that's the difference between the hyper real numbers and the reality, is that the numbers don't matter in those moments. And apologies to anyone who's sent one of these messages. I'm not always able to respond in a timely manner, so apologies for that. I wish I could. But in those moments, the numbers don't matter. That's when the hyper real gets broken. And even less, the numbers don't even exist. There's no numbers attached to a message from somebody or somebody reaching out. They're nothing. They're not even real. What is real is the life of the person who's actually typing something out, or someone who's produced the show and they sent it in, not because it's a transaction and they're buying something from us, but that every dollar is sort of a representation of just real pure value. Every dollar is a dollar somebody worked for, like a portion of their life. And every email is a real person, sharing their real feelings or the real experiences. They actually took the time to type in an email address. And, it's not just an aggregated number of clicks like you do get in our analytics or whatever. And it sounds really corny. But it really blew my mind yesterday. And I know this probably won't last forever, but it's valuable because this show and this community, for me, really breaks hyperreality in a way that I can't get anywhere else. Again, the fact that it even exists makes no sense by the numbers. And I think we should look for different ways in our own lives. Again, we should, I mean, I'm not going to say anybody should be doing anything, but for me, asking where does the hyperreality end and where does reality start, which inherently built into the system we live in, inherently is almost indistinguishable. And sometimes the reality is actually less fun. Sometimes the reality is like not as exciting as hyperreality. That's why a lot of times we choose the hyperreality. Let me take one more piece from this paragraph here. Sorry, I just kind of went on a rant there. Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality leaves us with a disconcerting question. In a world so deeply mediated by simulations and images, is anything truly real? Can we ever reclaim a sense of reality, or are we forever lost in a sea of representations that no longer refer back to anything original? These questions become more urgent as our society becomes increasingly digitized. Technologies like artificial intelligence, deepfakes, and virtual worlds continue to push the boundaries of what is real and what is simulated. As we move further into this hyperreal landscape, Baudrillard's insights remind us to remain critical of the media we consume and the ways in which our perceptions of reality are shaped. And conclusion here, navigating the hyperreal world. While Baudrillard's vision of hyperreality may seem dystopian, it may seem dystopian, it offers valuable insights into the complexities of modern life. As we navigate a world filled with simulations, images, virtual experiences, we must remain aware of the ways these representations influence our understanding of reality by questioning the authenticity of what we see and experience. We can begin to disentangle ourselves from the hyperreal and reconnect with the real world, if such a thing still exists. Ooh, see, there you go. Does it exist? Is real even real? Well, I would even suggest maybe thinking of real as real isn't as helpful. I suggest that we're not dealing with hyperreality and reality. To me, it seems, and I think this is the biblical stance. And I think this is what gives an amazing ability for believers to withstand the sort of narrative magic, the hyper reality crafting that is literally everywhere. I mean, you just can't get away with that. Is the recognition that it's not hyper reality versus reality, but that it's hyper reality versus the supernatural. And I think I'll leave that there for a second. I wanted to give a shout out to someone who texted the text message alert system, and they said something great here. I don't necessarily know if they meant to do this, but they did it. And so that's what they get. Did I close it? No, there it is. Come here. This is from 541, says, it's interesting as a person with no TV. This is a listener of the show, by the way, on the text message alert system. It's interesting as a person with no TV, no Wi-Fi, no social media, who only accesses the internet for necessity and only listens to select podcasts and a few minutes of AM radio, how alien it feels when you guys say things like, everyone is talking about, or everyone's feed is full of. I have no feed. 99% of my communication is in person. I am an extremist, I guess, in that I live day to day as a citizen of heaven on a diplomatic visa to an earthly kingdom, the Great Commission being the point of my existence, and everything that takes my focus off of this is a distraction. I think this is a great example. I think there's very rare, far and few between people who can honestly say this, the fact that they do 99% of their communication in person, totally disconnected, don't have a feed or whatever. I would say 99.9% of the time, that's a believer. Because as a believer, it's much easier to live that way when you are fully aware of the supernatural reality the base reality being one dictated and lorded over by the creator of the universe, and understanding our relationship with that creator. Because without that, I mean, what are you? You're like Ted Kaczynski in the woods. I don't know. It's just a different vibe, man. Okay, it's 1:15 right now. We do have a caller in the room here. I'm going to bring up the caller. We'll have a little chat here for about 10 minutes, and that'll be the perfect amount of time to land this plane. So on the line, we have Sir Psalm 40 going to bring you up. What's up, Psalm 40? How are you, buddy?
Hey, man. How you doing?
Good. Where are you at? Sounds like you're at a party or something.
No, I just got home from work.
Cool.
So this hyper reality thing, I've never heard of it before. This is my first time hearing of it. But I
Yeah.
think like near the end, you pretty much cleared it up. It's basically more like pseudo reality, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's again, thinking that the strawberry scented candle is the strawberry kind of thing. I mean, you see it in politics, especially. I think this explains a lot of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. I feel like it doesn't matter what you say or prove or disprove or whatever, how little or how much they actually know about Trump. It's more that he's the symbol. He's the symbol that is so devoid from reality that uh, even differentiating between reality and hyperreality becomes, becomes non-important, to someone like that.
Well,
Not to make it so specifically political, but
you were talking about how like something that is not real will seem more real than the real thing.
yeah.
And it reminded me of I used to have these like very vivid dreams,
Mm,
and it was kind of like that. Like just everything. I was really young, and like as I got older, I actually stopped having dreams altogether.
mm,
But just everything would always be more like vibrant, and like I could feel the textures of things. I remember smells that I would
yeah.
have from dreams. And it's like I guess dreams are a whole different can of worms, but
Well, not
they
really. I mean,
put
it's actually a really good example, because part of hyperreality, like true hyperreality, is called the simulacra, which is seeing something, thinking something is reality or real, that the original doesn't even exist anymore. Like Nazi is a version of that. It's kind of a way. Like somebody gets called a Nazi, and you're trying to say a number of things about them, when, like, if you really wanted to get deep down into it, Nazi in its original form doesn't and can't exist anymore. So and this is similar to like dream. When you're in a dream, you're seeing, you're feeling, things are so real, but the reality of it is that none of it exists. It's as real as it could possibly be, and it might look like a chair. It's you got a vibe. You see a chair, it smells like a chair, but that chair doesn't actually exist at all. It's a copy of a copy of a copy in your mind. It's really trippy, but I mean, I think the dream example is a very good one.
yeah, that's really pretty much all I had. It just
Yeah,
made me
no
think of
worries.
lucid dreaming.
No, dude, I think that's kind of the point. I think there's, the principalities and the powers, they found a lot of effectiveness, a lot of power comes in really keeping everybody in a dream state. In a way, there's sort of a waking dream going on, when so much of what we look around and perceive, especially online and the way we think about the world, the stories that are told to us, it might as well be a dream at some point, which is why it's so important to stay connected to true reality, which is the supernatural, which is God. That's a great point, man.
Yeah, I also think that I should encourage you because the other stuff you were saying about your time off, you you are aware already of your own value, but I just want to reiterate it. Like you Ngons are a very specific flavor, and especially now with not only Christianity but like spiritualism altogether becoming more popular. Um, it's dangerous out there to find people that you can trust. But yeah, besides even the trust factor, like whether we can trust you guys or not, I can see that you are genuine and gentle men, and that alone, has gained my respect.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, man. Yeah, that means a lot. It means a lot for you to say that. It means a lot when somebody does that. Cause yeah, again, I mean, we're constantly having to break ourselves out of the uh, I don't know, the paradigm of these symbols that would show success. I mean, like I said, followers, listens, views, all this kind of stuff, which is so easy because it's just so easy to focus on those things. But after taking a time off, yeah, coming back and being confronted with like, oh, real actual people that are not just a number on a screen. It's very powerful experience. So thank you very much for that, buddy. I appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime, man.
Amen, brother. We'll talk to you next time. Calling again.
All right, God bless. See you.
God bless. There we go. Look at that. We got a couple minutes here. Let's see. It's 1:22. All right. We got about 5 minutes. I'm going to bring Roy up here. Roy, keep in mind, thank God we're able to, or Sir Psalm 40 did you a big favor by not taking the full 10 minutes. So we're going to split it. I give you 5 minutes. Here we go. Roy, you're on the air. Roy, what's up, buddy?
Hello, my best buddy. I can you hear me okay, my
I can
friend?
hear you great, man. You sound great.
All right. All right. I just wanted to say, and I got the clock in front of me. And number one, I wouldn't change a thing if I were you. When I first saw you guys on the video, years ago, and with the googly eyes and everything, now I'm of the mind where if you took away the googly eyes and the visor, I think that would kind of take away from your persona. And I hope I'm not wrong for saying that. Okay. I mean, no offense to you or anybody.
I know, that's good. I'm
It's
glad to hear that.
I mean, you're Basil, all right, and it's part of the Basil persona. Now, the other thing, what you're talking about, it reminds me so much of the Unseen Realm, the Dr. Michael Heiser stuff, the videos I own, the DVD I own, the Aliens and Demons DVD. That's free on YouTube. I recommend everybody watch that. And Demons video, and the Bible says we look in a glass darkly, and I think it says something else similar to that elsewhere in the Bible, but don't quote me on that. Now the other thing, there is an old Beatles song I was heavily into in high school, but back in the 90s. It's called Strawberry Fields, and in one of the lyrics of Strawberry Fields, nothing is real. And that, I believe, comes from the acid postmodern era and everything. And I think to myself, man, if I only knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have been into that music so much. And but here I am. And now look at society, right? I mean,
Yeah.
where did that song lead us and lead society? Here we are, okay, with AI and everything, and nothing is real. Also, I'm gonna try to keep it short here. I'm gonna give 60 more seconds, if you will. Everybody keep going to the doctor and getting done what they need to get taken care of. The Germany and Austria and Britain, as you are aware, they went digital ID, and they're protesting still in the streets about it. So they have basically no freedom. They got carbon tax on their food packages and stuff like that. I forgot what else I was going to say, Basil, but I just wanted to touch. Oh, The 13th Floor. It's a 1999 movie. It came out right around as the time of The Matrix, and it goes right into what you're talking about. The 13th Floor. Gretchen Mol is in it, and Vincent D'Onofrio is in it. I highly recommend that movie. Look it up. Watch it if you can. Thank you for your time, Basil. Peace and love to the brethren.
Amen. Thank you so much, Roy. Appreciate you calling in, buddy. Great to talk to you.
All right.
Okay, I'm looking at it right here. The 13th Floor. Okay, 1999. Let's see here. Computer scientist Douglas Hall unknowingly gets involved in the murder of his colleague, Hannon Fuller, a computer genius who was killed just before the testing of his newly launched virtual reality simulation program. Dun, dun, dun. Sounds good. Okay, we'll check it out. Man, it's so crazy, dude. The time, what a silly idea I had to try to fit such a wild topic into an hour and 15 minutes or something. Did I even do this? Okay, good. I did. Yeah, hour and 15 minutes. That's my bad. That's what I get. I guess we'll just get to talk about it again. Hopefully it's something that is interesting to you guys. I know it's one of these trippy things, and I'm just a guy in googly eyes on the internet, but much like most when I bring up these big things, it's just something that, you know, we sort of see and feel on the horizon. To help gain understanding about what's being done to us, and seeing that reflected in other areas immediately after. I think you may have seen Gonza's tweet here. I'll pull this up. This was Gonza's tweet when yesterday. Yesterday says, "This is the time between our podcast covering the topic and some alt media covering it is shrinking. All roads lead to the Canary." November 3rd was our Hyperreality episode. November 4th was Michael Knowles, very popular alt media personality, conservative personality, tweets. Christopher Rufo, another one of these fellows, says, "The best way to understand Nick Fuentes is as an actor upon the stage of hyperreality, promoting an empty simulation of Nazism, which is a gift to the left and a bait for the right. Outrage drives the phenomenon. A cold, calculated response could stop it." And yeah, you know, I made the comparison with Nazi as a hyper-realistic term as well. This is, you know, it's funny because with all these things, much similar to a conversation we had on the show last episode, you know, I tend to think about or talk about these things on super broad levels. Try not to apply them too specifically to any one category. But as you can see here, Christopher Rufo taking the concept and very specifically aiming it at, you know, sort of political conservative you know, situation there, the division going on the right. And he's probably right, but I would also say that it's not just Nick Fuentes as an actor upon the stage of hyperreality. It's every single person on the internet is an actor on the stage of hyperreality, including Mr. Christopher Rufo. So, but you know, that's hard to fit into a tweet. All right, everybody, I got to go to my doctor's appointment. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for everything. Let me get you a little bit of the feeding the ducks here before we scoot on out. But remember, this is value for value, the only way we exist, miraculously, with no explanation, against all expectations and quantifiable metrics on the internet. We're only able to keep doing it because of people like you producing the show, getting involved, becoming real, and defying hyperreality. That's really, I mean, if nothing else, we got a new pitch for value, and that is break hyperreality. It defies what hyperreality dictates should be possible. It defies the illusion, okay? You can be a part of it. I mentioned before, you know, Gonz and I both support different shows that we support, value for value, and I can tell you from personal experience, when you produce a show with your time, your talent, your treasure, like you can here, go to canarycry.support. Not only does it, of course, help the show keep going, help the community stay together, but it also changes, it transforms your own experience in that community. It transforms your own experience in that. And I'd say, in a way, like I said, shatters the hyperreality, the sort of mysterious, vibrant dream state that is the internet, and makes it very real. It's very empowering, and of course, it's giving the finger to the system that does not want something like this to exist. So thank you very much. We'll be back with Canary Cry News Talk on Monday. But until then, think outside the cage.
Called it. We got a caller. We got a caller on the line here.